Good evening and a warm welcome to the Rushcliffe Borough Council's council meeting. I'd like to remind everyone that the meeting is being live streamed on YouTube. A recording of the meeting will be available afterwards on the council's YouTube channel. In addition, under the Local Authorities Executive Arrangements, Meetings and Access to Information England Regulations 2012, other people may film, record, tweet or blog from this meeting. The use of any such images or sound recordings is not under the council's control. May I remind all participants that to ensure the audio for the meeting is as clear as possible, all microphones should be muted as a default setting to keep background noise to a minimum. Any councillor who wishes to speak, please raise your hand via the virtual raised hand. We will follow the usual convention of first asking group leaders if they or their allotted colleague wish to speak on an item. When you are asked to speak by the Mayor, please unmute your microphone by clicking on the microphone symbol on the bottom left of the screen. Once you have spoken, please remute your microphone again. In respect of voting, on items that appear to be uncontentious, I will ask for any councillor to put their virtual hand up if they wish to vote against or abstain. If no one signals, the vote will be taken as carried without the need for a roll call. If a minority signal they wish to vote against or abstain, they will be asked to confirm which. And as long as there is a majority in favour, the vote will be carried without a full roll call. When a roll call is needed, councillors' names will be called out by Mrs. Tambini. In respect of motions, please submit any proposed amendments to motions during the meeting via the chat function to the monitoring officer, Sanjit, me and the Chief Executive. Please also confirm your seconder. Amendments will then be shared to the meeting via PowerPoint for a couple of minutes and will be posted in the chat for your reference during the debate. If anyone wishes to raise a point of order, please do this via the chat function if you can. However, if you are not seen, please inform me. I would like now to move to the first item on the agenda. So I'd like to introduce my first speaker because I'm going to have I'm not going to have a chaplain, I'm going to have different speakers to reflect the diversity of Rushcliffe. And my first speaker is Kath Sutherland, who is a humanist speaker, and she is going to lead us in a moment of reflection.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you for inviting me to open this Rushcliffe Borough Council meeting. My name's Kath Sutherland, and I'm a humanist celebrant accredited by Humanists UK, and it's an honour to address you. The work that Rushcliffe Borough Council does, providing a very wide range of services to the population, is essential, vital for Rushcliffe. And people have become so used to these wonderful facilities and amenities being there that they perhaps take them for granted. But were they ever not to be available, there would be immediate pandemonium and uproar. The needs and concerns that a council faces over time and in the 21st century, the needs and concerns that a council faces change over time. And so in the 21st century, the foremost crisis, which will increasingly come to dominate our elected institutions and in fact all our civic life over the years, is climate change and the other damage being done to our environment, our natural world, on many fronts. Climate scientists agree that climate change will become a threat to the very survival of the human race. Rushcliffe Borough Council is one of the organisations which have a responsibility to its constituents to face this threat in the same way that the Borough Council has risen to the challenge of COVID-19. Rushcliffe Borough Council is, I know, a very go-ahead council and capable of making the huge changes across your services needed to address climate change. I know that you aim to become carbon neutral, for which you are to be congratulated. And I hope that the many new policies that are urgently needed to enable Rushcliffe to do as much as possible to reduce carbon emissions and to deliver low carbon services are a prominent feature of your decisions today. Humanists believe in logic and reason, and therefore we give great importance to the words of scientists. In this spirit, we take climate change very seriously and hope that you will reflect the logic of what scientists say in your meeting tonight and in your future meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, Councillor Mallender, we have apologies from Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Mrs. Tambini. Have we any declarations of interest? Seems not. So the next item is to approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting of the Council held on the 2nd of July 2020. So Councillor Robinson.
Yeah, I'd like to move those minutes, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And Councillor Mason?
Thank you. Yes, I would like to second the minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any councillors wishing to object or to abstain from this vote? Please indicate your desire to object or abstain by raising your electronic hand. As there are no raised hands indicating a desire to object or abstain, then the minutes are carried. You want me to sign? Oh, sorry. Thank you. I have a few mayor's announcements to make. So I have been in this role for a whole 14 days and I have carried out 2 engagements. So the first one was a virtual one, which was the opening of Lady Bay Open Gardens. So that was very easy to do since I stood in my front garden being filmed by my excellent consort. And I pulled a ribbon. I pulled it rather than cut it so they can use it again next year. I don't know whether anyone saw the Lady Bay Open Gardens on Facebook, but all the gardens that would have been shown people to go round were actually shown on film or in photographs, so everyone could see them. Even my own garden featured, with the marvellous ability to do that since it was virtual and therefore all the bits that I wouldn't want people to see weren't included. And the second item was that yesterday I went on the bus, you may have seen, to a 100th birthday party for a lovely lady called Wendy. And I learnt 2 things there. That Wendy was a plotter during the Second World War, and I didn't know what that was. So if you don't, then look it up. And what a bagatelle cake was. And I have now tried a bagatelle cake, which I think I have before, but I didn't know what it was called. And Wendy was absolutely marvellous. She lives in her own house. We had a garden party outside for her, organised by family and friends. And she takes a very, very active role in her community under normal circumstances. And it was absolutely brilliant. And I gave her some flowers from a local grower in Lady Bay. So There were two very interesting occasions, and I do hope that there will be more to come. Leaders' announcements, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a couple of announcements this evening. First of all, the Chief Executive and myself met with the Boundary Commission Chairman and the Chief Executive, and we've agreed there will be a review of Rushcliffe. This consultation will start in September, and it will cover the number of councillors in Rushcliffe. It will cover the size of wards in terms of residents, and also the actual physical boundaries of the ward as well. I think the last one was about sort of 7 years ago when we had 50 odd councillors and we went down to 44. Obviously, we've had a lot of changes within Rushcliffe, and the Boundary Commission obviously will be reflecting those changes in their recommendations when they come back to us, Madam Mayor. My second point is just about the COVID-19, that to reassure members that we get information daily now back from the COVID-19 committee, the county-run committee, on infection rates. This will then allow us to react very quickly if we do see a spike, which they have seen, for instance, in Leicester. So there are plans in place there to react. I just want to assure members that we do have that information coming through now on a regular basis. I'd also just like to give members assurances as well in our support for businesses, and particularly the high street. You may have seen recently that through this pandemic, probably the biggest hit in business has been on the hospitality and the retail sector, of which has a big presence in Rushcliffe. So we're working very hard through our growth boards, through Cabinet, and through many of our functions to absolutely ensure that we get the support. I'm delighted to see the government gave the VAT changes, I think will help, and obviously the food discount scheme on top of the furlough and the grants that have been handed out. But undoubtedly, we have seen since they were opening 2 weeks ago, was it? We've seen many, many businesses struggling, and our high streets all over the borough now are going to be severely challenged, and it's really important that we get this support locally. And I want to assure members that Rushcliffe will do absolutely everything to ensure that they get that support. I'd also just like to, Madam Mayor, just confirm that we have a phased approach to opening our leisure facilities from the 25th of July. We've been working with plans now with Parkwood for some for some time, and also with MITRE as well, to ensure that we get a good opening schemes for the leisure centres, and that we can get the people through the doors as quickly and safely as possible. More information will be coming back on that shortly. Lastly, Madam Mayor, if I may, I'd just like to pay tribute to the former councillor Ron Etherington, who, as all of you know, he actually resigned through health a number of months ago. Ron was both a councillor, a mayor and a cabinet member for many years on this authority, and he did incredible work over there at Eastleigh, and lastly also at Sun in Bonington as well. So I'd like to pay tribute to Ron on the record, and we wish him all the very best, and also his family as well in his retirement from the council. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. There are no Chief Executive announcements, and there are also no citizens' questions. So we're going to move on to the next item, which is business from the last council meeting. So this first substantive item of business is to address these items that were carried forward from the March council meeting, because we didn't have time to address them on the night. So the first item is the notice of motion submitted under Standing Order number 12, which is to be put to the council by Councillor Jones and seconded by Councillor Mallender. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Since I submitted this motion, a review of enforcement policy is now on the scrutiny group agenda. But policies are words and resources and efforts are action. Both need more strength. This motion calls for the council to be more robust in ensuring that planning approvals and conditions are implemented. As members will be aware, many residents continue to stay put, and planning applications on existing homes seem to continue apace. Some just build anyway without prior approval, relying on retrospective approval. And of course, just recently, the Victorian house on Bridgeford Road was demolished without planning permission. Of course, of the alleged breaches, not all of them turn out to be real breaches, but just how many enforcement notices, Section 215 notices, stop notices, temporary stop notices, breach of condition notices, tree replacement notices, how many of these are issued and any eventual court cases occur? I'm not aware of any. Councillors should have information about this level of activity and outcomes. It's no surprise that there are too many instances where what is built differs from the approved plans. Hearsay from residents is that some builders say they can build something different than in the plans and get away with it in Rushcliffe. That is hearsay, of course. In one instance in Musters, what was built kept varying. So each time 7 different plans were submitted, always after the event. But a big issue is the new estates being built. In Rushcliffe 9 years ago, we had just short of 46,000 dwellings. Soon we will have had an increase of 28% in dwellings, and maybe more because local plan part 2 had to allocate even more land to meet the 5-year housing supply. I doubt that there has been a commensurate increase in the levels of planning and enforcement staff. One sign of the pressures is that enforcement officers are being asked to monitor developer compliance on the big estates. And for many years, we've had just 2 enforcement posts. And recently, for several months, this fell to 1 until a temporary enforcement officer was appointed. This level is too fragile. Developers cannot be relied upon to apply all planning conditions. It is too tempting to let the less profitable conditions slip by, like environmental measures, surface water drainage, and others. I'll give you some examples. Around the council's wildlife reserve of Sharphill Wood, the developers were required at the outset to install post and rail fencing around the wood and a hedgerow across the Wilford Hill Bridleway. In 2018, most of the fence was badly installed and inexplicable large gaps were left. No hedgerow. In early 2019, the council sent a letter to the developers to complete the fence as specified. Only this month, July 2020, at the initiative of the Friends of Sharphill Wood and a new Bovis manager, yet another, a meeting occurred which the temporary enforcement officer attended. Action to construct what was required 2 years ago was agreed in principle. Action is still awaited. The 2015 Supplementary Planning Framework document required connections to paths from the Bovis site along Melton Road, Edwalton. The county had plans as far back as 2012 to enable this to go along the west of Melton Road. In fact, as you leave the Bovis estate, a street sign shows that there is a pedestrian and cycle route to West Bridgeford. But soon after, the pavement ends in stretches of grass and hedges which force you to walk on the road before you reach the next bit of pavement to Machin's Lane. The path should exist, it does not. Madam Mayor, it is also awful that so many people have been affected by flooding in various parts of Rushcliffe and elsewhere. When flooding occurs from earthworks on building sites uphill from you, in this case Sharphill, it is galling. Twice, as you will know, in November and February, classrooms in Rushcliffe School in our ward were filled with red clay water. Most of this costly damage could have been avoided by the developers on Sharphill creating temporary pools and runoff channels as they belatedly did. Other residents created channels in their gardens to ensure the runoff did not enter their properties. From further up the old railway ditch drain, which is in Edwalton Close and runs under the filled-in car park by the Rushcliffe School, on 4 occasions red clay water ran down the Green Line ditch and flooded gardens, garages and roads as far distant as St Helens Road. In short, I'm told by an officer that discharge of water onto neighbouring land is nothing to do with planning or conditions. It is a common law matter and it will be difficult to prove where it came from. Rushcliffe School and my residents have no doubt where the water and the clay came from, and it is coming downhill. They are perplexed, as I am, that a planning authority can approve drainage plans for new houses and yet not include conditions which protect the impact of water on downhill neighbouring properties during and after construction. Furthermore, I doubt that checks are made by any authority that sustainable urban drainage systems which have been planned are actually built as planned and work as they should. In fact, one of the two SUDs already approved and built in Edwalton, just up from Landmere Lane, will now be obliterated by an office block which the council has approved. This is not good enough, Madam Mayor, as climate change bites, heavy rain and other extreme weather is the new normal. Our planning function needs to be stronger to protect and enhance residents' quality of life. There is a great need for the borough planners and enforcement to work on compliance in conjunction with county highways and the lead flood authority, and this takes time. The council has given high regard to enabling development. An officer was appointed to work on bringing forward the site east of Gamston. But given the massive increase in building in the borough, we should equally recognise the importance of having planning officer and enforcement time proactively ensuring compliance with conditions and variations on each new estate. Madam Mayor, being on the ball and monitoring large developments is an important task. The council is rightly quick to react and use enforcement when travellers impact on council land. If only we could get somewhere near this tough on wayward builds and actively ensuring compliance with planning conditions on new estates. Madam Mayor, plans are approved by this council. We just need a stronger approach and more follow through on implementation. We also need that joint enforcement of approved plans in which the county council has the lead role. I commend this motion to the council. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Richard Mallender, you're seconding the motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, Rod's gone into this in great detail. People need homes, and in Rushcliffe, the homes are being delivered. That's great. And there's new houses going up in Cotgrave, we're going in Keyworth, Radcliffe, Ruddington, West Bridgeford. It's fantastic. But we need to remember that as a council, our role doesn't start and end with the planning committee and the local plan. We have, amongst other aspects, a role of enforcement to make sure the developers stick to their approved plans and that they don't cause damage or discomfort or problems to neighbours while the work is underway, and as a consequence of neglectful sometimes actions or lack of actions once those builds are complete. It doesn't matter if it's one home or 100. Adding extra rooms, extra floors, not putting in place swales or dealing with drainage properly, we have to make sure that these developments are done correctly. We need to make sure we have the resources and the means to encourage appropriate development, and the resources and the means to cause a halt where is the breach of planning conditions or building regulations, and to make sure that there is follow-up so that residents in these new developments and around them in existing developments are not harmed or have their amenity injured or cause problems to by these new developments, whether that's runoff in the Sharp Hill area, whether it's new extra basements being built on developments, or whether it's fish dying in the Grantham Canal as a result of developers diverting streams that would normally feed that canal further on in parts of Rushcliffe. We all want to build the best homes for Rushcliffe and for all our residents. And in that spirit, I'm asking you to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mallender. I understand Councillor Upton is nominated by the Conservative group to be asked to speak first. Councillor Upton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to just pick up on Councillor Jones's point that how many enforcement notices, etc., those statistics are available. I haven't got those to hand this evening, but I will come back to him within the 7 days, if I may. Just a few other points that he picked up on, and I think I need to respond to. Again, quite a lot of detail about various developments and locations. I don't think it's appropriate. Indeed, I haven't got that detailed knowledge, but I accept that he's made some examples there and some allegations. I think he focused quite a bit on enforcement officers and staffing resources, and mentioned a couple there. I believe there needs to be a balance. It's probably a fine balance between inspection and staff resources and we have finite resources within the bubble, and it's a case of getting that right. And I personally believe probably 2 enforcement officers at the moment is appropriate, but clearly that's my personal view. I agree with, I think, the broad sentiment of Councillor Jones's motion, but I find the suggestion that all developers are not complying with the planning conditions somewhat disingenuous to them. And I given that the review of the planning enforcement policy is on the current work programme for the growth scrutiny group, I have a proposed amended motion, if I may read it out. I think Democratic Services may have a copy of that. Right, well, I'll read it. Having regard to the amount of approved building for Rushcliffe and evidence of non-compliance with planning conditions by some developers, this council supports a review of its planning enforcement policy through the task on the current work programme for the growth scrutiny group, and any recommendations will be reported back to Cabinet. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Upton, do you have a seconder for that motion, that amendment, please?
I have. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I'm pleased to second that, and I will reserve the right to speak.
Thank you. We will now debate the proposed amendment. Councillor Gray.
Thank you. I believe the amendment sticks with the motion. So I would say in this that the Labour Group supports this motion, supports the amendment on the motion, because the boroughs are is growing very rapidly at the moment. With the approval of Local Plan Part 2, this growth due to continue. A number of large and some not uncontroversial sites due to be progressed over the next 5 years. We state in our corporate strategy that our priorities are quality of life, efficient services, sustainable growth and the environment. Good planning enforcement ensures that we're committed to all of these points. Quality of life is our first priority, and on this point, Councillor Jones's original motion and this amendment, I believe, exemplify this. We need to make sure the impact of development is minimal during all phases. Clearly, filling classrooms with building site runoff is unacceptable, and one which could have clearly been prevented. My father-in-law, who is fortunately extremely physically fit, that said, he'll no longer play me at squash, spent many hours out digging drainage ditches around his property so the same red slough didn't make it inside his house. So the council needs to make good on its promise to work with our partners and create great, safe and clean communities to live and work in. And again, I believe that this, the original motion and this amended motion would achieve that. In the pursuit of delivering efficient services, we need to make sure we have an appropriate number of staff for the job in hand. As Councillor Upton has said, he personally believes we do so, but in examining our compliance officer with the growth scrutiny group should ensure that we have the right people and resources to meet the demand and deliver the best service for our residents. Reviewing these policies as suggested will help ensure the sustainable growth that we promise our residents, and by increasing our efforts to enforce compliance with approved plans, we're protecting our residents and making sure all developers play by the same standards. By not strictly enforcing compliance, we could very well be risking our own natural environment, and as Councillor Mallender has mentioned, assets such as trees and hedgerows can be removed in the blink of an eye, but can take decades to replace, and changes in overland water flows can have huge impacts for both residents and natural environment. Thorough examination of our enforcement policy through the amended motion and proper compliance, I believe we can get ahead of these changes and ensure Rushcliffe remains a great place to live, work and build new homes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gray. Councillor Thomas.
Could you put the amendment back on screen, please? I haven't had time to memorise it.
If you could just hold on for 1 second, Councillor Thomas, we'll do that for you. If you could just bear with us for a moment, please.
I understand it's being typed up in the chat. Right. Would you mind waiting, or do you want to speak now, Councillor Thomas?
It's appeared in the chat. I just need a moment, please.
Oh.
Okay. I support the amendment. Do you want my comments on the motion at this point, or after the amendment has been taken?
If the amendment is carried, it will become the motion. If it isn't, then the original motion will discuss that. So
I'll make my comments at that point then.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? No. There's no one else who wishes to speak, so we'll go to the seconder of the amendment, which is Councillor Clark, who's reserved the right to speak.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, obviously, I think we all agree with the sentiment of the original motion. It's just a shame that it's actually come to us tonight, because it's actually been on the work programme on the scrutiny group for several months. So perhaps if Councillor Jones had either asked officers or myself, he would have seen that we are actually going to be discussing that in the work programme, and perhaps he may wish to actually request that he either sends a submission in or addresses the scrutiny group with the evidence that he assembled, because it is a very important issue. I don't dispute that, but as it is going to be discussed in the scrutiny group later on in the year, then perhaps we need to have had this discussion tonight. But I definitely second the amendment. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. The proposer of the amendment, a right of reply. So, Councillor Upton.
Madam Mayor, I've raised my hand, just so you know.
Yes, you're next.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll be very brief. I'm pleased to get the support to the amended motion that's been stated. I'll not prolong the debate. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jones, you're the proposer of the original motion, so you have a right of reply.
Thank you. I'm happy to support the amended motion by Councillor Upton. I regret if there was some inference in the original motion that all developers were getting away with things. I did actually point to the fact that it tends to be the less profitable conditions, like environmental measures, surface water drainage and the like, that tends to get left. And I did make that in my speech, and I would be more than happy to make a presentation as Councillor Clark invited to that scrutiny group, because I've gone into quite a lot of detail about what's impacted on residents in Musters Ward and also by chance Ed Walton, which I'm happy to inform others about. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Are there any councillors wishing to object or abstain from this vote? Please indicate your desire to object or abstain by raising your electronic hand. This is the amendment, voting on the amendment.
I will now, apologies, I'll now call out each councillor's name. If you could say for or against, please.
No, there's no need to do that, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
No one's raised their hand.
Oh, okay, sorry. Jumping the gun.
There's no raised hands indicating a desire to object or abstain, then the amendment to the motion is carried. Do you want me to do it? Oh, right. Yes, Councillor Thomas, I believe you wanted to speak, didn't you? Did you want to speak again?
Yes, I do. I have a little speech here. It's important that prompt action is taken on enforcement when issues arise and are notified to the council. Ineffective or slow enforcement can encourage further disregard of planning regulations. A culture can develop where it is seen to be easier to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission. Officers need to keep on top of these investigations and actions. Following up cannot be relegated to the back burner, or it is too easy for the situation to drag out. This increases the distress for neighbours affected. Other agencies have to become involved. I will give you 2 examples. Firstly, the impact of a recent high-profile police intervention involving criminal activity in Sutton Bonington could perhaps have been avoided if the matter had been dealt with promptly and effectively as a planning enforcement. Secondly, I would cite a case in Eastleigh where a building was erected for agricultural purposes. It and other buildings on the site are being developed into an event venue through a series of changes not benefiting from planning permission. The failure to regularise the situation promptly and effectively makes for stress and uncertainty for both the developer and the neighbours. Large developments need active monitoring. Conditions on large developments often come with trigger points. For example, X has to happen before the first home is occupied. We should review the procedures in place to check that such trigger points are reported and conditions dealt with at the right time. Examples where this has not happened include roads, pavements, open space and drainage works in new developments in Eastleigh. Paragraph 58 of the National Planning Policy Framework states, effective enforcement is important to maintain public confidence in the planning system. Enforcement action is discretionary and local planning authorities should act proportionately in responding to suspected breaches of planning control. They should consider publishing a local enforcement plan to manage enforcement proactively in a way that is appropriate to their area. This should set out how they will monitor the implementation of planning permissions, investigate alleged cases of unauthorised development, and take action where appropriate. Rushcliffe has a planning enforcement code of practice, and the scrutiny work should consider whether the code is being followed and whether it needs to be revised. I agree with Councillor Jones that the staffing levels for enforcement need to be considered. Indeed, this extends to planning officers in general. Delays in determining applications can lead to work starting before planning permission is granted, which in turn leads to enforcement being needed. The financial outturn for 2019 to 20 shows a favourable variance of £264,000 in planning application receipts. I hope scrutiny will consider whether staffing levels are commensurate with the additional work generated by the increase in applications. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Councillor Upton, since this is now the motion, it has now become the motion that we now have to vote on, do you wish to say anything more?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think quite a lot's been said this evening on it. It's clearly going to be referred to the group to look at it, and I think most of the points have been made. Thank you.
So we're now going to the vote on the motion as amended. So are there any councillors wishing to object to or abstain from this vote? Please indicate your desire to object or abstain by raising your electronic hand. As there are no raised hands indicating desire to object or abstain, then the motion is carried. So we now move on to questions. These were the questions submitted at the meeting in March. I believe the first one, question A, is from Councillor Jones to Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And just to comment to fellow members, I'm aware that these questions could have been referred to officers, but the point about raising them in council is that they're open to the general public. So my question was, do any of the council's contact centres enable European Union nationals and their family members to book an appointment to use the digital document verification service for European settlement as part of their application for settled or pre-settled status, thus enabling applicants to retain their passports, biometric residence cards, instead of having to post them to the Home Office and potentially obviously lose them?
Councillor Mason, would you like to reply?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do apologise in advance if I lose it. My computer keeps saying that internet connection is unstable. So hopefully I will remain stable while this is happening. Perhaps Councillor Jones doesn't realise, but actually it's the Nottingham County Council that lead on this. We do not see them in our contact centres, but we do refer them on to Nottinghamshire County Councillors. The EU settlement scheme is, as I say, by Nottinghamshire County Council, and those wishing to apply can find more information on the County Council website, or actually Councillor Jones could actually speak to a county councillor and he might have more information than I do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Councillor Jones, do you wish to ask a supplementary question?
No, well, the question is it known whether the County Council enable that process to occur, like many other authorities do, where the verification can occur of the documents?
No, it can't. If you need to speak to anybody, you have to go to the County Council and ask what their arrangements are. It is their arrangements that they need to deal with. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. So the second question is also from Councillor Jones to Councillor Upton. Councillor Jones.
Sorry about my voice. In view of the research by Queen Mary University Hospital of London and others, which established beyond doubt that exposure to levels of particulate 2.5 greater than 10 per cubic metre results in changes to the structure of the heart, as well as damage to the lungs, of course, would you ask the local development framework to consider adopting the World Health Organization's guidelines of no more than 10 per cubic metre instead of the much higher level of 25 in current planning applications? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Upton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The new Environment Bill is proposing to bring a number of changes to the current air quality legislation in the UK, and this includes new requirements to monitor and tackle particulate 2.5, and I'm no great expert on particulate 2.5, I've done a bit of research, but I think when this becomes law, then this council's guidance, plans, policies will need to be amended to reflect any new legislative requirements. And until then, I think we should wait, because I envisage the new Environment Bill becoming law fairly soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Upton. Councillor Jones, do you wish to ask a supplementary question? Yeah,
I mean, my question was whether that could be recommended to the LDF in the new plan, whether or not the World Health Organization standards are adopted by the government, which they may well not be.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Upton.
Understand what Councillor Jones says, but I reiterate, I really would want to wait until what the Environment Bill says. Otherwise, you can go down a road of changing things only to have to change them again and again. I think let's just wait a short time, I hope. Let's see what the Environment Bill, when it becomes an act, says, and then let's roll it out across the Borough Council's policies and actions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Upton. And the next question is from Councillor Thomas to Councillor Upton as well. Councillor Thomas.
In light of the fact that Eastleigh is bathed in sewage whenever there is heavy rainfall, are you able to explain how Rushcliffe ensures that Severn Trent Water meets its responsibility to increase the capacity of its sewerage systems to deal with the cumulative additional demands of new homes and other development?
Councillor Upton.
Seems like very popular this evening, doesn't it? Well, we consult with Severn Trent on applications for major developments, and the Water Industry Act of 1991 imposes a continuing duty on all sewerage utilities to provide, maintain, and improve their systems for collecting and treating wastewater. Now, developers have the absolute right, however, to connect to the public sewerage systems, and any issues concerning the capacity of those drains or pumping stations or sewage treatment works are the legal responsibility of Severn Trent. And as I hope you're aware, this council, through its Eastleigh Growth Board, is discussing with Severn Trent the concerns that you mentioned to try and find a permanent solution for Eastleigh. I understand that they have, this is Severn Trent, that they've completed their sewer flow monitoring for Eastleigh, and they are using this information for hydraulic modelling, which I guess is on a computer. And once this is verified, it will be used to assess the sewer network in Eastleigh, how it's performing and what improvements that may be required. Don't want to get any more technical than that, but hopefully that's a response to your query, Councillor Thomas. Thank you.
Thank you. And do you have any idea, Councillor Upton, when any changes would take place, given the amount of development that's already taken place and the amount of sewage that is already being generated?
I haven't a specific date. With the greatest respect, I don't sit on the Eastleigh Growth Board. I think you do. Perhaps it's a question you could ask them at their next meeting or the officers in between. I personally get the feel from correspondence with Severn Trent that I've read recently that it's not long. Not long, in my view, would be probably a couple of months, but I'm not sure. Perhaps if you could ask the Growth Board support officers, they may be able to help you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Upton. I'm afraid you haven't finished yet. So the next question is from Councillor Gowland, please.
Thank you. Trent Valley Internal Drainage Board are experts in managing drainage dikes and ditches efficiently and effectively. And at a recent meeting, they stated that they were open to considering adopting drainage channels on new developments. It seems preferable to have essential drainage dealt with by a statutory body rather than leaving it to the vagaries of management companies. What are the advantages and disadvantages to Rushcliffe Borough Council of asking Trent Valley Internal Drainage Board to adopt drainage ways upstream, downstream or through new developments, possibly using money from SIL, Section 106 or directly from the developers?
Councillor Upton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's important to emphasise that the Trent Valley Internal Drainage Board are not responsible for the maintenance of all the watercourses and drainage ditches in the borough of Rushcliffe. Clearly, that would be a huge undertaking. However, they are consulted on major planning applications, and they also identify certain applications themselves when we publish the planning applications. This is their opportunity, I would suggest, for them to raise any interest that they may have in the future management and maintenance of any watercourse. I think drainage watercourses can be a very complicated issue, especially when the ownership, or what I call riparian rights of owners, is looked at. This council has very limited powers in regards to riparian rights of watercourses.
Sorry, Councillor Upton, we are having difficulty hearing you. Well, I am.
Sorry. I say this council has very limited responsibilities in terms of riparian rights. We don't own the land at the watercourses that you refer to are going through, and I wouldn't want to go down that road, because I think we would be acting ultra vires in many respects. We don't own the land. It's really for Severn Trent to either make a case for getting involved or not. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a supplementary question, please, Councillor Gowland?
No, thank you. I'll take it back to Trent Valley. Thanks.
Thank you. And the next question is from Councillor Gaunt, again to Councillor Upton.
Hello, thank you. The 21% of new homes built in the flood zone in Rushcliffe was the highest for anywhere in Nottinghamshire. The Environment Agency, the Labour Party, and even Boris Johnson in his election campaign have all categorically stated that building on floodplains should be halted. Will the council pledge to call an immediate halt to all building on floodplains in the borough?
Councillor Upton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm proud to say that we're building more homes than most councils, and I acknowledge we've several flood zones in Rushcliffe Borough. Nevertheless, all the sites allocated in our local plan were thoroughly scrutinised, and no adverse comments were made by the Planning Inspectorate. As far as we are aware, in the last 5 years at least, none of the new housing sites have had any significant flooding. All planning applications in any flood zone are subject to a flood risk assessment, and those in flood zones 2 and 3 are consulted on with the Environment Agency. Major schemes are also consulted on with the County Council because they're the lead flood authority. I therefore believe that we've sufficient procedures in place to deal with this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you wish to ask a supplementary question, Councillor Gaunt?
Yes, please. Yeah, I'd like to just point out that the Wilford Road, the work that was done on the Packman Dyke on Wilford Road was done in 2015, before the housing estate at Ed Walton was built. 2 days after the planning permission was granted on Wilford Road, it flooded 48 hours later. So what I'm calling for is the second one, so I knew you'd say no to that, is will the council commit to carry out an up-to-date assessment, ask for up-to-date assessments of all the developments on floodplains, especially in the light of recent flood events, and considering the future impact of climate breakdown and the likelihood that these floods will, these things will lead to more flooding in the future. So can we have I'm calling for an updated assessment to be taken place, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The response is quite brief, really. This isn't our responsibility. This is the responsibility of the Environment Agency and the County Council as the lead flood authority. If they wish to do a review, then that's for them to do it. All we can do is refer developments and issues to them. And as I say, without repeating too much, as far as we know, there have been no flooding of new homes, not existing or older properties, new developments which are included in our local plan part 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Upton. That concludes the business carried forward from the previous ordinary meeting in March. So now we're moving on to item 9, the asset management plan, and I call Councillor Edivine to move, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Our land assets, properties and buildings are an important part of the fabric of our Rushcliffe community. They help to underpin the image of Rushcliffe as a great place with great lifestyle and great sport. Not just the famous venues of City Ground and Trent Bridge, which of course we don't own, but our own playing fields, leisure centres and open spaces, alongside important assets, commercial assets that we own. And it's very important that these assets are maintained, managed and developed. And the asset management plan exists to ensure that we have a working document to make sure we give our residents and businesses a great place to work and play and enjoy. It is good practice to have an asset management plan and a strategy that ensures our assets are used to meet our corporate objectives as a borough. Across the borough, we have a great variety of property, and this is listed in Appendixes B and C of the agenda item. And by By property, I mean not just assets with a financial value, but a value for residents for their benefit. We own a country park, playing fields and leisure centres and open spaces, all of which need to be managed for the welfare and well-being of our residents. We own a portfolio of offices and industrial units that not only provide an income stream, but valuable premises for businesses to start and grow for the economic benefit of the borough and our residents and becoming employees. The asset management plan was considered in scrutiny by the government's group in December last year, who approved the structure set out to manage the council's assets. It was then considered by Cabinet in March this year, the last time, incidentally, that a Cabinet meeting was held in the flesh. And it's now before us for approval with a recommendation that Council adopts the asset management plan in Appendix A and supported in Appendixes B and C. This is a working document, and some changes have been made to enhance performance measures in line with our objectives, and those are detailed on pages 20 and 21. These amendments have been made in such a way to emphasise not only the importance of the financial value of our assets, but to underline the benefit of to our residents of these assets and the contribution to all of our well-being. And the key changes which were published last evening are made in points 1 and 6. Madam Mayor, I sincerely hope, therefore, that all councillors will support the agenda item and approve the recommendation to adopt the revised asset management plan detailed in the appendices. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Eddie-Veen, and I believe Councillor Moore is to second.
That's correct, Madam Mayor. I'm happy to second this item and I reserve the right to speak.
Thank you. Councillor Gray, would you like, oh sorry, Councillor Gaunt, I believe is speaking for Labour.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to begin by thanking the officers on behalf of the Labour Group for creating a fantastically clear and easy to digest document that must have taken a considerable amount of time and effort to produce, and allows people like me the chance to understand what would otherwise be quite overwhelming. The diversity of the investment portfolio shows a sensible and responsible strategy that spreads risk and brings good returns for the people of Rushcliffe, which we in the Labour Group respect. As local government has its budgets continuously decimated by central government, we're becoming ever more reliant on these investments to help us provide our vital services. And until a different and more progressive government can be elected, we need to look at how these assets can fill the gap. I must express a few concerns. The asset challenge process, which states that we have the right to right to assets in the right place, performing efficiently and effectively for the purpose for which they are held. Any asset identified as surplus to requirements will be rationalised. This may mean it is repurposed or disposed of. We need to be wary about how this is used, particularly by the current administration, and very careful consideration will be needed concerning each sell-off of public assets with proper transparent scrutiny. The asset management strategy does show a rigorous process on paper, which is reassuring, but we need to be very careful. The public assets are not just there to serve us now, they are ours to use and maintain, but they're also there for future generations to use. And once things are sold, our descendants lose their right to use them or decide what to do with them. We need to be increasing the number of communally owned investments if we are to narrow the vast gulf of inequality that plagues our country, not selling them off into the hands of a narrow select few wealthy investors. So we need to be careful. Having mentioned some concerns, I'd like to commend the borough on its asset investment strategy. Although I would have preferred to use a less corporate title, maybe public ownership or something like that, it's really pleasing to see that the borough is looking at ways of securing property to ensure that rental incomes stay within local communities. This increases wealth locally rather than going to the pockets of private investors who often extract wealth out of communities and drive up rents to increase their gains. Community wealth building option that this is moving towards is really exciting opportunity for the borough, and they should continue to look into it. Taking on the ownership of these premises gives us the opportunity to support local independent businesses by offering stability and good rental value. It also allows the people of Rushcliffe to have a say in what happens to these assets through the democratic accountability of the council and its cabinet. The council should be promoting this asset investment strategy to all parish councils in their borough and explaining to any that are not aware the benefits of acquiring and using the general powers of competency under the Localism Act of 2011 that allows them to acquire property and invest in their local communities to build wealth and keep wealth locally. The Labour Group would happily help support any further initiatives of this nature in the future. We will be voting in favour of this agenda item. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gaunt. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I'm particularly pleased with the slight amendments that Councillor Edivine's referred to. I do think that the investment strategy for income should be within the borough, as has already been mentioned, to create wealth and jobs within the borough and income. I do think that the priorities that are really important, as Councillor Edivine has said, and I'd particularly emphasise the second one, where it's about quality of life, which says we mean how our residents feel about living in the borough, its environment, and the community facilities they can access. And as the borough continues to grow, I think it's important that those community facilities, those green spaces, are expanded for the new residents, many of whom are living in much more cramped accommodation and gardens than currently is the case. So I look forward very much to new allotments and facilities which are within this document. I'm very happy to support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Malander.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I think the priorities identified in the document are right and appropriate. Efficient services, quality of life, sustainable growth, and the environment. We have a wide range of assets from homeless hostels to community halls and country parks and nature reserves, publicly owned infrastructure for the public good. We have to look after and maintain this for the future of our borough and make sure that we invest and look after our assets wisely. I'm very pleased to see that the Carbon Reduction Action Plan will form an integral part of the future management of the council's assets, and I'm happy to support this.
Thank you, Councillor Malander. Councillor Thomas.
Motion.
There is much that I agree with in this document, and I appreciate the work that has gone into producing it and the improvements made in the last few days. My view is that the overall thrust of the strategy is still too much concerned with managing assets for financial gain rather than providing services for residents now and in the future and safeguarding our environment. We are in this for the long term. Our assets are to serve residents into the future, not to minimise rate bills in the short term. I have concerns about the asset investment strategy prioritising financial objectives over the social and economic well-being of residents. I note that on page 24, the commitment to invest in properties within the borough, and I hope that this means we will no longer be investing in properties outside the borough, where the benefits to our residents are less easy to discern. Like Councillor Gaunt, I have concerns about the asset challenge process described on page 22. Again, I would like to see a greater emphasis on social benefit, consultation and public opinion. Madam Mayor, I will be supporting the motion, but only just. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. There is no one else who has asked to speak. So, Councillor Moore, you reserved your right to speak as seconder.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It appears that you've got, Councillor Edivine has got unanimous support across the council, so I'm quite happy for it to go to the vote now. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Edivine, do you wish to have a right of reply?
Yes, I'd just like to make a few points on some of the comments that were made. We're particularly proud of our record in investing in the borough, and I'd like to point to things like Bridgeford Hall, which was pretty poor state of a building. We've completely renovated it, and we have completely turned it round and made it a success that the borough can be proud of. We've also completely renovated Copgrave and the town centre there. Copgrave, as we know, was an old mining community, and I'm particularly proud of the fact that it regularly returns Conservative borough councillors because of the amount of investment we've made into that community. So I think when I hear people suggesting that we don't actually do things for the benefit of the people in the borough, then it saddens me because I think we should be proud of the record that we've got in achieving the things moving forward in the borough, and I think I'd leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Edivine. Are there any councillors wishing to object to or abstain from this vote? Please indicate your desire to object or abstain by raising your electronic hand. As there are no raised hands indicating a desire to object or abstain, then that is carried. So the next item are the revisions to the council's constitution, and Councillor Robinson is moving.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. The constitution document is actually a live working document that does need regular reviews. So this paper I brought tonight really reflects updates that are mainly required by law, but also in some of the operational changes that we've actually made, particularly during the pandemic. They're actually set out on Appendix 2, and you can see on there some of the legislation changes that we've had to make as we go forward there. So you look, for instance, at Part 3, which is the amendment to move the reference to the Local Government Act 1972. But you'll also see in there, Madam Mayor, references, for instance, to the establishment of the West Bridgford Special Expenses Group there as well. So this is an operational document. As I say, it's mainly driven by legislation changes. I'll also just like to add, it is actually going to the Corporate Governance Scrutiny Group actually in July, who do review that. And obviously they welcome feedback and any amendments. So all I will just say, Madam Mayor, I'd just like to move the recommendation on page 63, section 2. Letters A and B. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Councillor Mason is seconding.
Yes, I would like to second the recommendations, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Are you reserving the right to speak?
I reserve the right to speak.
Councillor Gray.
The Labour Group read the amendments with great interest, and we support the process of it being a live document, and look forward to taking part in scrutiny later in the month. We support this, and that's all we have to say. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gray. Councillor Jones?
Yeah, the Liberal Democrat group are very happy with this, and we'll be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Malander?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, also happy to support the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Malander. Councillor Thomas?
We don't have any comment on this, and we'll be supporting. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Mason, you reserved your right to speak. Your microphone's muted. Ah.
Sorry, is that better?
Yes.
I was just going to say I'm glad that unanimity has broken out and that we all agree. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson, do you wish to write a reply?
No, nothing further to add, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any councillors wishing to object to or abstain from this vote? If so, please indicate your desire to object or abstain by raising your electronic hand. As there are no raised hands indicating desire to object or abstain, then that is carried. So the next item 11 is a notice of motion, and this is to be put by Councillor Jay Walker and seconded by Councillor Bansal. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Rushcliffe's tagline is great place, great lifestyle, great sport. It wonderfully encapsulates the vision for health and values that we work towards for the benefit of our citizens. But we need to offer more than just taglines. Real commitments need to be made to show that we embrace our motto and truly believe that we value sport and lifestyle. The most recent Rushcliffe Borough Council cycling strategy was produced in 1995, 25 years ago. How can we expect county to put a priority on the cycling provision of our borough if we don't offer them a plan from which to base their implementation strategy on? This past week, we have seen our citizens being let down by the county. Coming bottom of the league, Nottinghamshire trailed 75th place out of 78 local authorities, winning just 263,000 out of a potential 573 available. The funding is for emergency measures to help more people walk and cycle, saving reduced space on public transport for those who need it most. The lack of ambition shown at county is tragic for all who live in our borough and is coupled with a historic low provision. Past provision for cyclists has been instigated by the borough. We need to propose a report to be part of the county's comprehensive strategy. Clear, well-defined cycle and pedestrian paths in the planning of our new housing estates, linking to existing infrastructure with a plan for the provision of cycling storage that means people can feel comfortable leaving their bikes securely on every part of their journey, and embracing initiatives such as rural rides, which have been scrapped. Our residents are going to be expected to travel in socially distant ways for the foreseeable future, and the traffic chaos generated from the closing of Clifton Bridge highlights the desperate need of the borough to embrace and encourage alternative forms of transport into Nottingham. Half of Rushcliffe's residents work in Nottingham. That's more than any other neighbouring borough. And one of the best ways to travel into the city for the people of Rushcliffe is on their bikes. We have seen firsthand these past few months in lockdown that more can be done to encourage safe passage for cyclists, and a more joined up, collaborative approach with the city and the county is required. We call on this council to actively support alternative forms of transport into Nottingham, in particular cycling, and ask for a detailed piece of work to be undertaken by scrutiny and reported back to Cabinet on improvements that could be made to the cycling network in Rushcliffe using the newly available central government funds. Thank you.
Councillor Bansal.
Hi, Madam Mayor. Yes, I'd like to second the motion and reserve the right to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. I understand Councillor Clark wishes to speak first on behalf of the Conservative group.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, I do want to make it absolutely clear that this council does strongly support cycling. So please do not have any doubt about that. However, to ask scrutiny to carry out a detailed piece of work is misplaced. In fact, actually, Councillor Walker used the phrase, a more joined up and collaborative approach. And that would be the correct approach to work with the County Council. Cycling can be looked at on two fronts. One, as part of new developments within the borough's planning process, and two, through the County Council as highway authority. It is for the County Council to make decisions on the cycle network on the public highway. Therefore, far better to work with the County Council rather than through a scrutiny group to achieve improvements when a scrutiny group does not actually have jurisdiction over the public highway. So in terms of cycling provision within developments, this work is carried out by planning officers at the time of planning applications and when approvals are given. And that is done to ensure that provision is made for cycling. It is quite in order and perhaps even incumbent upon all us to lobby our county councillors where there are things that need improving. Why don't we lobby our county councillors to propose and to bid for improvements to the cycle network. There has been mention of the new funds coming available from central government, and actually only this week, I as a county councillor in conjunction with the parish council have submitted a bid for improvements to the cycle track from those funds. I stress we've made a bid. Whether it's successful is another matter. However, Councillor Cotty will be giving more detailed information when he seconds this amendment, which I am now about to propose. So I think, as if by magic, yep, I think it is appearing. But for the sake of lack of doubt, I will read it out. This council supports alternative forms of transport in and around Rushcliffe, in particular cycling, and will strive to work with Nottinghamshire County Council as Highway Authority to identify improvements that could be made to the cycling network in Rushcliffe. And I'm hoping that Councillor Cotty will second that amendment. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Cotty?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'm happy to second the amendment proposed by Councillor Clark. And
So we can't hear you, Councillor Cotty.
I would like to second that amendment by Councillor Clark, and I would like to reserve my right to speak, please.
Thank you, Councillor Cotty. We will now debate that proposed amendment. Councillor Gray.
I'd like to pass, sorry, I've not had a chance to read this motion, so the amendment through.
It is, I think, Councillor Gray, it is on the group chat.
Yes, I can just see that now. I'm wondering if as this is council, well, I suppose Councillor Walker will have a good chance to respond here. Sorry, one moment. I believe that the substantive part of the original motion was to produce a piece of work with which to work with Nottinghamshire County Council and the Highways Authority. Whereas stating that we would strive to work, I don't think has the same, it changes, I believe this amendment changes the substantive motion. So I would not be supporting this amendment as it waters down the proposal too far into something that is not necessarily a concrete piece of work. So that would be my take on this. Obviously, I would be reminded to take Councillor Walker's feedback on this, as she is the proposer of the original substantive motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I welcome the spirit of the original motion. I welcome Councillor Clark's commitment to improving cycling and also to canvassing himself as a county councillor. And no doubt there are other county councillors here who might take this message strongly on board. I would be happy to support the amendment if it said, if the word actively were inserted before will strive, because we know sometimes that the best intentions fall foul when it hits the county council. We do know, I'm aware that there have been some new cycle routes created by the county council. And I'm also aware a long time ago, Rushcliffe produced cycling route maps, which goes back about 20 odd years. And the one good thing that's come out of COVID is that more people are walking and cycling. And we know that is good for health, we know it's good for the environment, and we know it's good for reducing obesity, which is relatively high in our population. So I would like to amend the motion that's been put to add the word actively strive to work with the county council. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. would the proposer be prepared to accept that?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, that's a bit like saying that you will be actively active. I mean, to strive, the amendment does not say inactively strive. So by implication, you're being active in striving. So you're basically doubling the words. So I'm quite happy with the amendment as I have proposed it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
In that case, do you have a seconder, Councillor Jones, for your amendment?
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, someone else doing it. I would quite happily second that amendment.
So is that Councillor Gaunt?
Yeah. If I'm allowed to say why. Or not.
Yes.
Yeah, well, so we had a cycle plan in 1995, or a cycle strategy, or whatever you'd like to call it. And I've seen that document. It's all hand drawn. It's quite interesting. And typed up on some sort of typing machine that used to exist. It was quite old, but every single thing that was in there and all the wonderful little maps that were drawn have actually come into existence. It's some of them taking a long time, but they all actually exist. So I don't see what the problem is with us coming up with just a simple version of that again, more modern, more up-to-date version that includes some more cycle lanes and other such things that we can show with the county and work with the county on. If you're striving to work with the county, why not strive to work with the county by producing just a small document that has some cycle routes on it? It seems a bit strange. So I think you should put the word actively, because the word actively is an action word, isn't it? Striving is more of a kind of, I mean, I could strive all day to get out of my hammock, but it's quite hard. It's a bit of a strange word, the word strive. I think it doesn't produce any activity. The word actively strive is a much better option. And although I think the original motion was stronger and much better, the only way we seem to be able to get anything through here is by watering it down. So if you're going to water it down with the word actively strive in there, and that would be probably okay. Thank you.
Now that has been seconded, does Councillor Clark wish to make any other comment or stay with what he said previously?
Madam Mayor, let's not get hung up over arguing about words. Just if you're wanting to put it to the vote, just put it to the vote.
Right, well, we need to discuss this amendment now. So does anyone else wish to speak on inserting the word actively in front of strive to the amendments? This is an amendment to an amendment. Councillor Gowland, do you wish to speak on this amendment?
Yeah, well, I want to speak on this motion, and I think it's going to come down to this amendment. So yes, collaborating with the county council is not sufficient. Councillor Clark himself said it was in his role as parish councillor that and county councillor that he made this. You mentioned being a parish councillor. Your knowledge, parish councillor.
Point of information, Madam Mayor. Can I just point of information? I said that as county councillor, I worked in conjunction with the parish council to submit.
Okay, I beg your pardon. But that's the point. The point is the same. You worked in conjunction with the parish council who know the local situation. And we are best placed in Rushcliffe to understand the issues of cycling in Rushcliffe and pedestrians indeed in Rushcliffe. We understand in particular the new estates being established because we understand the planning because we're in charge of it. And so I think we need an active policy about cycling. We need an active document which can be given to the county council at appropriate moments saying this is what we need, this is the strategy, because we are best placed to state it. So I go with the word active, please.
Thank you, Councillor Gowland. Anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Jones, would you like to speak on your amendment at all? You're on mute.
All right. I just think energy needs to be behind this, and yes, working cooperatively with the county council is fine, but the striving is of itself is, as Councillor Gaunt said, it's easy to strive unless you do this in an energetic way. And we know we need to capitalise on the benefits that have come out of COVID and not waste time on that. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. So we're now voting on the amendment to the amendment, which is to insert the word strive in front of, sorry, I beg your pardon, actively in front of strive in the amendment. Strive to work with Nottinghamshire County Council. Are there any councillors wishing to object or to abstain from this vote? Please indicate your desire to object or abstain by raising your electronic hand. We seem to have quite a few. So because we do have quite a few councillors who wish to object or abstain, we are going to go on to Mrs. Tambini, who will be doing the roll call. So please say whether you are for or against the amendment when your name is called, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Adair.
Against.
Councillor Bailey.
Against.
Councillor Bansal.
For.
Councillor Beardsall.
For.
Councillor Begum.
For.
Councillor Bushman.
Against.
Councillor Butler.
Against.
Councillor Clark.
Against.
Councillor Cumberlack. Councillor Cumberlack.
Abstain.
Councillor Cotty.
Against.
Councillor Dickman. Councillor Edivine.
Against.
Councillor Gaunt.
For.
Councillor Gowland.
For.
Councillor Gray.
For.
Councillor Healy.
Against.
Councillor Howitt.
For.
Councillor Inglis.
Against.
Councillor Jeffries. Councillor Brennan.
Against.
Councillor Jones.
For.
Councillor Major.
For.
Councillor Mallender.
For.
Councillor Sue Mallender.
Abstain.
Councillor Mason.
Against.
Councillor Moore.
Against.
Councillor Murray. Councillor Murray.
For.
Councillor Phillips.
Against.
Councillor Purdue-Horan.
Against.
Councillor Robinson.
Against.
Councillor Sims.
For.
Councillor Stockwood.
Against.
Councillor Maureen Stockwood.
Against.
Councillor Thomas.
For.
Councillor Upton.
Against.
Councillor Verdi.
Against.
Councillor Rex Walker.
Against.
Councillor Jen Walker.
For.
Councillor Way.
Sorry, for.
Councillor Gordon Wheeler.
Against.
Councillor Jonathan Wheeler.
Against.
Councillor Williams.
Against.
Thank you.
That amendment clearly falls. So we're now returning to the first amendment that was made by Councillor Clark. And we'd reached, we were going through the opposition groups, we'd reached Councillor Jones, who've made the amendment. Now we're going on to Councillor Mallender to speak if he wishes on the amendment, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, well, we've got the amendment, but without the amendment to the amendment, so I'm glad we're making some progress. Planning, yes, we will need to play our part very much so in making sure that we're building not just better homes, but better neighbourhoods. And part of that is making sure that people are not reliant exclusively on the car for getting about the place. We have had in Rushcliffe in the past urban extensions, developments, new estates built on West Bridgford and in the villages around our borough that are wholly reliant on people getting around by car. They're designed with the car in mind. Pavements that are very narrow, in some places barely existent, and not connected to any kind of safe cycling routes or even safe walking routes in some places, and people being effectively marooned there. What we need to do is put in place decent cycling infrastructure for our residents. And yes, that's very much falling to the county council. And we have quite a few county councillors with us tonight, double hatting, as it were, on Rushcliffe Borough and on the county. And I think really it is, you know, however it's worded, up to us as a borough to say to those county councillors and to the county council that you have a responsibility to make the best provision for cyclists that our residents deserve to help us get around in a carbon neutral, ecologically friendly way, so we are not tied to cars, even electric cars. And I know some folks they do have them, but we have to make sure that we have alternative provision. The county has the responsibility. Let's make sure that as a borough, we hold them to a firm commitment to put that in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mallender. Councillor Thomas, do you wish to speak?
Passing to Councillor Way to speak on the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Way.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm slightly confused about where we are now. Are we just looking at the amendment? Or are we looking at the whole product that Councillor Walker has presented to us?
We're discussing the amendment made by Councillor Clark.
So will we be coming back to continue discussing what Councillor Walker said?
If this amendment falls, then yes. If it is carried, then no, because it.
Oh, right. Well, I better have my say now. Because originally we were in support of the motion put forward by Councillor Walker. And I think probably as the amendment goes, I would be supporting that. It is important that we move to a greener future and build on the incidental results of lockdown. Over recent months, as other people have said, the air quality has improved and many people have become fitter and found financial gains in not using cars. But we would like to see an end to joint pedestrian and cycle routes. Already a mention has been made of some of the dangers. Failing this, there should be definite delineation between pedestrians and cyclists, preferably with a physical barrier. Mixing cyclists and pedestrians has the potential for severe injury, and my family can testify to the devastation and life-changing impact of cyclists disobeying rules, such as continuing to cycle where told to dismount. With the introduction of electric scooters, similar issues are likely to arise. Anyone who's seen these in European cities will know that they are a danger to pedestrians when used on pavements. The recently introduced regulations to limit them to 15 miles an hour is still too fast if used in pedestrianised areas. And organisations representing blind and visually impaired people are already expressing concerns. Even though electric scooters and cycles are not supposed to be used in most pedestrianised areas, the rules are often flaunted, putting pedestrians in danger. I hope that strict enforcements will be put in place. More should be done to train cyclists and to encourage them to obey rules and signage and take responsibility for their own actions and the safety of others around them. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Edivine, please.
Sorry, I didn't realise I still had my hand up. Sorry. I didn't wish to speak.
Didn't wish to speak. Councillor Robinson.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I think there's just two things that councillors should observe and notice. you're talking about weakening the original motion. We've actually strengthened this this motion, because one of the things you put in the original was about, and I quote, transport into Nottingham. Where's the ambition? What about cycling to Bingham, Ruddington, other places like that? So the original motion was very narrow. It did not encompass Rushcliffe as a borough. There's a lot of cycling that's got to be done all over the place. So I think where we, the new motion, the amendment that Councillor Clark's put forward is actually put, and I quote, in and around Rushcliffe. And that is something that we want to address with the county, not just going, I quote, transport into Nottingham. So I think this absolutely strengthens it. I also make the point, because Councillor Gallagher talked about we're best placed, just remember that there is a county councillor for every inch of Rushcliffe. So they're also very well placed. We have very committed county councillors, and I'm very, very pleased that they do show a lot of commitment to cycling, and we're very happy to work with them, and we will get very positive results, as we have done. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I can see some of the advantages of the different motion. We'll be supporting it. I do think we'll come back to this within a year to see what progress has been made. And it's clear that the Conservative group wishes that to be the motion, and obviously it's going to get carried. So I'm happy to carry it. I'm happy to support it, but I think a number of us will be looking to see what happens within the next 12 months. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Cotty, you reserve the right to speak.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, thank you, Councillor Walker, for bringing the subject up. And obviously, anybody might think there's a bit of an election coming next year. Obviously, the way that the announcements from government have been exaggerated across the county are quite disappointing, really, because at the county council, I know that they're trying to make sure that we can support and help wherever we can with the cycling side of it. It's not just cycling, it's about walking as well. It's about transport around the county under the crisis that we've got with the virus. So this is an opportunity to talk about some of the responsibility that falls on the county council, and the cycling strategy and its delivery are detailed in the Nottinghamshire County Council Local Transport Plan and the Cycling Strategy Delivery Plan, which are on the County Council's website for all the public to see, whether you're a county councillor, district councillor, or just a member of the public. So I encourage people to go and have a look at that, and I'll come back to it at the end of what I'm going to say. Over the last 4 years, the County Council has invested £4 million in cycling improvements across this county. 3.6 million have been invested in the last 3 years under the Conservative administration, which shows the commitment the County Council have in these difficult financial times of delivering cycleways where we can and where we're able to do it. As well as small improvements, the 4 million of investments been delivered to improve cycling networks in Arnold, Mapley, Mansfield, Newark, Beeston, and last but not least, because of alphabetically, West Bridgford. And you might remember that £1.1 million has been spent in West Bridgford recently to create the cycleway that's now there as you come into Bridgford from Wheatcroft Island. When the Highways Agency did their consultation last year on Wheatcroft Island and Nottingham Night, I attended that. I spoke to Highways England, and on the maps, you wouldn't be impressed with anything to do with cycleways because there wasn't much there. But I have tackled them over that at that meeting. I've been informed that when they come forward with the scheme to actually do it, the County Council can bid in to get cycle infrastructure into this development on those 2 islands on the A52. So The government wants highway authorities to develop a local cycling and walking infrastructure plan to help identify future cycling infrastructure improvements. And the County Council is working with the D2, N2 highway authorities on developing that plan area-wide to help ensure it's joined up across the whole D2, N2 area. And once the plan's completed, County Council members will identify their priorities for future cycling infrastructure investment for delivery in Nottinghamshire if and when these funding opportunities come forward. It's currently proposed that council members will consider the cycle strategy and priorities and any potential improvements to deliver these as part of the future Communities and Place report, of which one will be coming to that committee in September. Similarly, County Council members will determine cycling priorities and schemes included in the Emergency Active Travel Fund proposals in due course. As you know, Trench 1 was mentioned in the proposers recommended for this motion. And yes, we did get 263,000. And it was down to temporary measures, a lot of what was done. But it does put us in the right place as a county council to go forward for the next tranche of money.
30 seconds.
Sorry?
30 seconds.
Okay, well, I will skip some of the rest, but 2.3 million is not a lot of money when it costs £240,000 per kilometre to actually build cycleways. If anybody wants to go and put a comment into the county council, make a new highway request on the council's website, will allow everybody to put their views forward to the county council. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I do second the amendment. I do apologise.
Yes, thank you. And Councillor Clark, you have a right of reply.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, only just a few points because I think it's all been said really. But Councillor Cotty talked about the county's cycling strategy, so we won't rehearse that again. Grateful for Councillor Mallender mentioning better neighbourhoods, absolutely, and we need to be making a better environment for all our residents. And Councillor Way talked about more should be done for cyclists to obey the rules. Absolutely. How we do that is another matter. And Councillor Robinson was quite right when he talked about this is about the whole of Rushcliffe, not just routes into Nottingham alone. So with that, Madam Mayor, I'm quite happy for it to go to the vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Are there any councillors wishing to object to or abstain from this vote? Please indicate your desire to object or abstain by raising your electronic hand. There's one. So do we do the roll call? No. So there are some councillors who are raising their hands, so we will do. Oh, we're just going to go to them. Sorry, there's not very many this time. Mrs. Tambini will be reading out the names.
Just to clarify, am I reading out all of the councillors' names?
No, just the ones who indicated that they wished to abstain or vote against.
Can I just clarify for people that this is voting against the amendment or for the amendment, and we still get to vote afterwards on the actual motion once it's passed?
You will do if the amendment falls.
Right. No, but if the amendment passes, we still then vote on it as a motion, don't we? Again.
Yes, we'll still vote again for
as a new motion.
I still
Yeah.
get to
Okay.
vote
Thank
reply,
you.
yeah.
I can see on the screen that Councillor Gray, Councillor Thomas and Councillor Gowland have all put up their hands, and Councillor Bamsell. Are all of Councillor Gray, are you voting against the amendment?
Voting against the amendment, yes.
Councillor Thomas, are you voting against the amendment?
Yes, I'm voting against the amendment, and I think Councillor Walker and Gaunt are wishing to speak.
Yes, yes, I was going to say that there are two councillors on one screen.
And Councillor Gowland, are you voting against the amendment?
Yes, against.
And Councillor Walker, Councillor Jen Walker?
Against, thank you.
And Councillor Gaunt?
Yeah, against.
I can't see anybody else on my screen that's raised their hand.
I raised my hand, Councillor Bansal here, against.
Oh, apologies, Councillor Bansal. Yes, I can see your hand now at the top of the screen. It's just come on. Councillor Bansal, are you voting against the amendment?
Against.
Thank you.
The number of councillors voting against was 5, so the amendment is carried. So we're moving back to the original motion.
Substantive motion.
Amended motion. Yeah, yeah. So this is now the amended motion. So the wording is as amended, which is what we have just voted upon. So does anyone wish to speak on the amended motion, which is Councillor Clark's wording? It's on the screen now.
Do I get the right to reply, Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, go ahead now, please.
Would you like me to go ahead? Is that right, Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm really disappointed at how my motion has been made quite wishy-washy, to be honest. And it's also, unfortunately, been used as some sort of political party broadcast on the Tory party at the county. But I'd like to bring it back to what it's actually about. And it's actually about the people of our borough needing to get into predominantly Nottingham in a safe way so that they can get to work, so that public transportation can be used for those who need it. That was the point about the Nottingham, was because right now public transport has to be prioritised for those in need. So our priority is to make sure that Rushcliffe has a strategy in place, as it did 25 years ago, to make sure that this can be happening now, not next year, now. Because right now we're in the middle of a global pandemic that requires action. So that is the actual essence of this motion that has now been watered down quite considerably. And I'm so disappointed that that's happened, because I'd like to take us back to what the actual motion was about. Okay, many thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Clark, do you wish to say anything more?
Just very brief. Well, my amended motion has now become this substantive motion, Madam Mayor. So I talked to the substantive motion and just remind members, actually the comment that Councillor Robinson made, that this now makes the motion talking about the whole of Rushcliffe and not just focusing on routes into Nottingham. But I think enough has been said. Let's go to the vote. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. So, are there any councillors wishing to object or to abstain from this vote? Please indicate your desire to object or abstain by raising your electronic hand. No. As there are no raised hands indicating desire to object or abstain, then the motion is carried. So next item is a motion to be put to council by Councillor Gowland and seconded by Councillor Jenny Murray. Councillor Gowland.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The UK has lost 97% of its wildlife meadows in less than a century. Our roadside verges provides a chance to undo some of this damage. When the Weymouth Relief Road was opened in 2011, 7 hectares of verges on a very busy road became a crucial site for biodiversity. Yellow clusters of kidney vetch, the only wildflower where Britain's smallest butterfly, the small blue, will lay its eggs, dominate the roadsides in the summer. Since the roads opened, more than half the species of butterfly known to inhabit Britain have been recorded on that grassland. Rewilding our verges is a win-win situation. For budgets, done right, rewilding the verges will reduce the cost of managing them, as they will be cut later and cut longer. And this in itself will save fuel and help towards our carbon neutral target. I'm aware that our county was one of the first to adopt this as a pilot scheme, and they felt the financial savings were not as great as they were in Rotherham, which is the beacon for this policy, because of the need to revisit some of the verges to trim them for visibility for cars. I don't think this would be such a problem for the verges in the borough, so I imagine we will be able to save more money. First, we're only planning on planting knee-high wildflower meadows, and secondly, cars should be travelling slower in the relevant areas where the borough manages the grassland. Second, further to that, it's worth noting that breaking up the visual environment is actually safer for cars anyhow. For wildlife, plants are the powerhouses of our food chains. Without diversity in plants, you don't get diversity in other wildlife, and our food chain suffers. Rewilding builds biodiversity by providing habitats and food supplies for insects, including the all-important bees, birds, and even small mammals, and eventually means protecting our food supply. It would be lovely to have the colourful verges as in Rotherham, but it's more important to produce verges full of native wildflowers and grasses with as little intervention as possible. Finally, it could be great for people. There are many studies showing that being in a more natural green environment is good for our mental health and actually alters brain development. And wildflowers make people happy. We can't all live in the countryside, and it would be unsustainable if we did, but we can make the use of the space around us in the towns and roadsides to bring back some colour and variation to our lives and to make our environment as attractive and sustainable as possible. We've all probably seen the photographs of the flowery, bee-friendly waysides that have been planted in Rotherham, and no doubt we have all been asked by residents to achieve the same for our own wards. Rushcliffe Borough Council resolves to ask scrutiny to review the feasibility of sowing native wildflower seeds along the road verges that it manages and put forward recommendations to Cabinet. I commend this motion to Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gowland. Councillor Murray?
Yes, I'm seconding it.
Do you
can I reserve the right to speak, please?
Of course. Thank you. So any discussion, please? Councillor Robinson? Councillor Robinson. Oh, Councillor Cotty, sorry. I believe you want to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group, Councillor Cotty. You're on mute.
It should be on. Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Before I start speaking, though, can I say that the hand on my computer is not working? So whether I vote for or against or attract your attention, it's not activating. Okay.
In the chat, or can you wave manually?
Yeah, I can wave, but if you can hear me now, I'll start, if that's okay.
Of course. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Councillor Gowland for the motion with regards to wildflowers. It's something that's close to me, the environment and how we look after it. But I've got to say that I can't support the motion because it's incorrect. In a second paragraph, she wishes to ask scrutiny at Rushcliffe Borough Council to review the feasibility of sowing native wildflower seeds along the road verges that it manages. And I'm afraid that there are no road verges that Rushcliffe Borough Council manages within Rushcliffe. It is all managed by Nottinghamshire County Council as the highway authority. So I can't support the motion as it's not in the Borough Council's will to do what is suggested, and I fear it would not be best use of scrutiny time. I appreciate the sentiment, as I've said in the motion, and as I say, I am environmentally keen myself, and at the end of 2017 I proposed a scheme at County Council for this, and in the year 2018-19 we arranged trials I'm afraid 2018 was global warming, and the trial areas that we worked on suffered from drought. We did again last year, managed to do some trials, and working with parish councils who'd contacted us over these issues, we went to some of their areas. So we do have at County Hall a County Communities and Place Review Development Committee. So that was passed over last year to them to review it in detail to find out what we could do and couldn't do. The County Council will always cut verge grass where it's safety implications. So whether it's at junctions or visions or exits or entrances, we will always cut that grass because of safety on the highway. And you can't just let grass grow. I mean, I accept that Councillor Gowland said that it was about we couldn't save enough money, or implied it to me, but actually it wasn't about the money, it was about not spending more money if we could. But you do actually need to remove the grass that you cut when you cut it. You can't just leave it. And also the Community Place and Review Group looked at this in detail. And you would have had a public document issued on the 2nd of April. I know you can't see much of that. If we're in a council chamber, you could probably see more. But the date at the top is April the 2nd, 2020. And that paper was coming to committee to move it forward. It includes grass cuttings and the impact with that grass on biodigested plants, wildflowers, weed spraying, tree maintenance, etc. So it is something that the council is doing. But as I said, it's not, the district council does not, or the borough council doesn't have any verge that it cuts. So the sentiment of the motion I accept, but I'm afraid factually it's incorrect. So I won't be supporting the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Cotty. Councillor Gray.
Taking regard to Councillor Cotty's comments, I'm wondering if we can propose an amendment. I'm just bringing the original motion up to here. So the original motion along road verges that it manages. Can we amend road verges to grass areas that it manages?
Is there a seconder, please?
I can second that, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Or is it would that be accepted by the original?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Please, may I just check the amendment? You wish to change the words. Could you just confirm which words you would like to change?
Road verges to grass areas.
Thank you.
And I would commend this then for all of the reasons that Councillor Cotty has just underlined, that it would increase biodiversity, and again, if we bring it to scrutiny, we can look at it in a similar way to the county has in trialling some areas to start with.
Thank you. I'll go on to Councillor Jones. Do you wish to speak?
Like Councillor Cotty, fully support the motive and the intention behind it. I do have some uncertainty about which grass areas we control, and some of them would not be, I know, would not be appropriate for native wildflower seeds, especially when they're just adjacent to somebody's house in a narrow strip. So I'm interested to hear other councillors, including Councillor Cotty's comments. I'm well aware it's the County Council and Highways Agency in particular that we should be encouraging to enable wildflowers where possible. I noticed the City Council's managing to do that on the Ring Road in the Central Reservation, and so there's no reason why the Highways Agency and the County Council can't do that. But I won't decide which way to vote until I hear a few more comments about the grass areas within the borough. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Mallender.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I think it's really, you know, I hope that the amendment does pass. I think it's very, very sensible that we do take note of everything that's been said here from Councillor Cotty and for the original motion as put forward. Regardless of who owns the grass owns the grass in a sense, doesn't it? It's us who are looking after the environment for a short period of time. We're here and then we're gone after a few years, but it's our job to make sure that we look after the planet while we're here. And if this helps, whether it's being done as part of the county council, whether it's being done through the borough, through the green spaces we've got, or whether it's being done by our many parish and town councils who also have a role in managing our green spaces, I think that it's something that we should be doing. We should be encouraging the growth of more green spaces, more wildflowers to help improve the biodiversity. It's good for the nature, it's good for the environment, it's good for us as well. And I think this is something we really should be getting behind, whatever the final outcome of the wording here, and supporting this excellent idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mallender. This is the order in which I've seen people speaking. Can I just point out that the amendment has been accepted by the proposer, so therefore there's no need to vote on this amendment, the amendment to the motion. So the first person that we saw was Councillor Clark, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, well, the point with this is that the grass areas, as Councillor Cotty has already explained, are on the public highway. If we go into the other grass areas, then perhaps I could remind members that many years ago, we did actually look at the grassed areas that we are responsible for and manage. Two areas that come to mind are Abbey Park and Compton Acres, where we changed the cutting regime and we introduced wildflowers into those areas. So we do already do it, to be honest. But I suppose maybe we might get accused of being churlish if we are saying that we're not going to support wildflowers. So I suppose it might be reasonable in time for scrutiny to look at this, but I just need to emphasise the fact that we do already do wildflowers in Borough Council managed areas. So this isn't something new. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Gordon Wheeler, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I thank Councillor Gowland for the original motion. Councillor Cotty alluded to a paper which went before communities, or was going to go before the Communities and Review Development Committee. Well, I chair that committee. It was meant to come on the 2nd of April, as Councillor Cotty had said. Sadly, we all know what happened, COVID-19. It didn't happen. Those are the days we didn't have virtual meetings. Virtual meetings came much later. My commitment to this developing wildflower areas is total. That's why the paper was coming forward. I have a pre-meeting with officers later this month as a prelude to a meeting in September, a virtual meeting in September of the committee. No question about it, my commitment is there, complete. And so is the commitment of every single member on that committee to doing what Councillor Gallen wants us to do. But we have to do it in a measured way. We have to then identify those areas which can actually benefit from wildflowers planting. That's not also a matter of just throwing a few seeds down and thinking, oh, that's good, that'll grow, and we'll have some wildflowers. It has to be managed carefully. That's what we plan to do to the county council. And there's no reason on earth why borough councillors can't contact me. I'll be very happy Rushcliffe Borough councillors contact me with any areas in their wards which could benefit from the scheme. That's what we want to do. I'm not saying it necessarily happen, but I will feed it through to officers. Yeah, I've already asked all the county councillors on my committee to do that. So no, that's not a problem at all. But we have to manage this carefully. Councillor Clark did say that there has been a scheme in Compton Acres. That's my ward. What I will also say, yes, it did take place, not necessarily my huge enthusiastic support at the time, because we, as I said before, and I'm repeating myself again, it has to be managed carefully. And we must work with our environmental partners. Could it be Nottingham Wildlife Trust or any other appropriate body who have expertise and experience and the same commitment and desires we all have to ensuring that wildlife planting succeeds. We can all pat each other on the back and say, we're throwing a few seeds down, it'll grow. That's not wildlife planting. It has to be done in a far more measured way. So, Councillor Gowland, I have certainly no problem supporting the principle of what you say. There is a difficulty, has already been alluded to, because verges are maintained by the County Council and not the Borough Council. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Wheeler, Councillor Robinson. You're on mute.
You're on mute, Simon.
Sorry, but thank you, Madam Mayor. I think if the Labour Party had done a bit more research, you wouldn't have to go through all this thing of amending and actually making policy on the hoof, which is absolutely ridiculous. It would only take them 5 minutes to have actually established who actually manages the vergers. And to be honest, I'm absolutely appalled that there's such, I don't know, what is it, negligence, that you put motions like this, which had absolutely no chance of actually swimming because we don't control it. Now, if you ask all 44 councillors, they would all tell you their absolute commitment to the environment. The great thing is that this administration has actually delivered now for many years our tree planting schemes, the way we manage our parks, all our wild spaces are actually commended all over the county for how good they are and how well they are kept. And, you know, we're putting motions forward here basically to do what we do. It's as simple as that. And we have a great communities team. I say the tree scheme alone, over 4,000 trees went out last year. As Councillor Gowland, I'm sure, would back me and say, you talk about supporting nature and the environment. What better scheme has there been? And that was unique right across the county. So we're actually doing it. So I go back, I just can't believe you put motions forward that were actually not achievable. And then you put amendments through on the hoof. It really is. I do find it absolutely incredible. But ultimately, I want this party of the Conservative Party. We do back the environment. We have a fantastic record on Rushcliffe. We're not going to play the politics with it all. And we're going to we'll back this amendment and move on. And hopefully that perhaps the Labour Party do more research next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Councillor Eddivine.
I had actually just lowered my hand because of I was making a similar comment to Councillor Robinson.
I apologise. Councillor Thomas.
I don't know, we haven't been called to speak as a group, according to the convention. Councillor Way is speaking for us on this issue. Thank you.
Yes, I do apologise. It was just that there was another amendment made. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Since I decided what I was going to say, things have been moved on quite a lot. I don't see this as being made as a party political issue, and I really resent the way that's being done. However, back to the question is that wildflowers are really important to most people in the borough. And in Eastleigh, we've been trying to develop a strategy for planting wildflowers and to reduce the amount of cutting, while maintaining regard, obviously, as is expected, the safety requirements. But the difficulty we've come across, and I think Councillor Wheeler has probably answered my question here, is being able to establish which council is responsible for which area, so that we can discuss with them, welcome a dialogue with the appropriate authorities about how we would like to see it developed. Now, Councillor Wheeler's just welcomed the opportunity for us to contact him to discuss it. And I will do that. You'll hear from me in the next day or so, because we're really keen to move this on. It's an important thing for the environment of the whole borough. And it has been shown in other areas to have a financially beneficial effect, as well as all the other things that have been mentioned in terms of health and mental health and well-being. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Way. And it's either Councillor Jenny Walker or Councillor Gaunt. I'm not quite.
It's Councillor Gaunt.
Councillor Gaunt.
Right, thank you. I was waiting. It's been a long evening. I was waiting for Councillor Robinson to leap out of his green screen and start being outrageous. It's really a really inappropriate way to talk to new councillors. Councillor Gowland put that motion forward with nothing more than the desire to produce something good out of this. Right? This went through the officers to get onto this agenda. So if there's anything wrong with that, and this is not in any way an accusation of something that's not been done properly by the officers, because they're brilliant. If there was an issue with this motion, it should have been picked up at that point. And it should not now be being picked up by Councillor Robinson attacking another councillor. It's totally out of order, and that's the way he behaves a lot. Now, that was my first point. My second point was where I was actually wanting to pick up Councillor Clark, and this was not to attack him at all. It's just just to clarify a few things. We've stopped talking with the amendments about road verges. We're now talking about land in Ruddington, Rushcliffe, that is grassland, wasn't it? It's grass that we're talking about, grass areas, not verges particularly. So that removes that kind of point. And Councillor Wheeler also mentioned that we should lobby him, which we will obviously do, about council areas, so that we can get flowers on the verges there if that's possible. That'd be brilliant. We'll all be following up on that. That's fantastic. So we will be doing that. Thank you. But we're actually talking about Rushcliffe land and grass areas, aren't we now? And I know we do a few of those, and that's brilliant. But that's what the motion is now about. Okay. Not about road verges anymore. So we need to clarify that, because that's sort of muddying the water a bit, isn't it? So thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Murray. Yeah.
Hello. I just wanted to say that for the third year in a row that Rotherham, the River of Flowers, caused a stir, and the annual mixes they sowed along 8 miles of grass areas and roundabouts, people have connected to commented on the scheme from all over the world. This policy has saved Rotherham £25,000 on their ongoing management and has provided environmental benefits, including nectar, flowers and seeds from many pollinating insects, birds, and even some mammals. I can't see any reason why we don't try it in Rushcliffe. For instance, Buckfast Way, which is managed by Streetwise, they have some areas that aren't mowed at all, but there's no wildflowers there. There's no reason why we can't have some wildflowers. And there are other areas in Rushcliffe as well, where we could also have the mixes of wildflowers.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Councillor John Stockwood, please.
Thank you very much. I think we'd just like to make 2 brief points. Firstly, in the asset management plan that just went through, there are a number of pieces of land described. My understanding that many of those pieces of land in Bingham, and it may be the case across the rest of Rushcliffe, is that they are open amenity spaces within housing estates, which are used by the local residents. They may be places where children go out to learn to walk, or where older people go out to get out of their own homes. So it's not necessarily the case that every piece of open amenity land is an appropriate place to become wildflowers. I just had a quick look. My understanding is that the Rushcliffe Nature Conservation Strategy is a policy of this council. I'm just having a quick look at page 9. I'd just like to share with councillors that it does actually say that the appropriate management can support a range of grassland plants as well as invertebrates, small mammals, foxes and birds of prey. We will seek to ensure all amenity land is sympathetically managed and continue to develop blue butterfly sites. So it's my understanding that really this should be a scrutiny, a request for scrutiny of an existing policy, because I understood that it was our policy that we want amenity land to be sympathetically managed and we campaign and we have a policy to do that, which is called the Rushcliffe Nature Conservation Strategy. And I thought we had representatives, or at some point in the past, I was one at one point, where we attended the group who oversee the implementation of this. And perhaps it's a case that what we really need here is to bring this policy to scrutiny, so new councillors can come to understand the work of the council and how that can be implemented. If it's the case that supporting again a policy that I think I already supported is beneficial, then I'm happy to continue to support a policy that I already support. But I do think it's important that if we do go through scrutiny with regards to open amenity spaces, that we do recognise that some of these places are not just pieces of grass that can be turned into wildflower areas, but we should also remember that there are important spaces within high density housing developments that have a range of uses to local residents, and that should be considered at scrutiny as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stockwood. Councillor Rex Walker, please.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, I've changed my mind.
It's Councillor Gowland. Did your seconder speak? Yes, you have spoken. Sorry, I do beg your pardon. Councillor Gowland, please.
Thanks very much. So thank you very much for the great support for this concept. First, I'd like to say I'm aware that the county did this, and I'm really pleased that the county did this. And I wasn't implying at all that they stopped because of costs. And actually, I'm really grateful to Councillor Wheeler for pushing that forward at the county level. I'm very aware of the multiple ownerships of the grassland within mine and Councillor Bushman's ward. It causes a lot of stress. So I apologise for using the word verges when maybe I meant grassland, but I know that this council manages a lot of grass. The reason I brought this forward as a motion is because I do know that, surprisingly, maybe to the members of this council, there are differing views on this. And clearly, it's not appropriate to let all grass grow long. As people have said, you know, some grass needs to be short. People want to play football. There's lots of different uses for this land. But what I want to do is change the balance of interest towards the wildflowers where appropriate. And this is why I've not said that we're going to let all the grass grow that the borough owns. I want it to be taken to scrutiny to work out what the most appropriate way is, the most feasible way is to manage the grassland with the balance of balance being in favour of rewilding. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gowland. So we're moving to a vote now. Are there any councillors wishing to object to or abstain from this vote? Please indicate your desire to object or abstain by raising your electronic hand. As there are no raised hands indicating a desire to object or abstain, then this motion is carried. So the next notice of motion is from Councillor Thomas and seconded by Councillor Way. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There is a perception in East Leek, certainly, and I guess in other areas taking large housing developments, that infrastructure is not provided to support the developments, not in a timely fashion, and all too often, not at all. This leads to stress on existing facilities. Within the Community Infrastructure Levy, Rushcliffe currently collects funding for playing pitches and ancillary facilities and for indoor leisure provision. It is important that the council is seen to allocate this fairly and promptly, and that partners such as charities and parish councils who run playing fields have their opportunity to access such funding where this relates to development in their area. Mechanisms need to be developed and publicised. The money should be spent where it is needed, not squirreled away. So the motion is, this council resolves to develop a fair, transparent and consultative process to allocate the portions of the Community Infrastructure Levy on its infrastructure list collected for provision of or improvements to playing pitches and ancillary facilities and 4, provision of improvements to indoor leisure provision. Furthermore, the Council resolves to allocate these funds for spending in a timely fashion so that the infrastructure to support development is provided sooner rather than later. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Councillor Way.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I second this motion and would like to reserve the right to speak.
Thank you. Councillor Gordon Moore, you're wishing to speak first on behalf of the Conservative group, please.
Well, hopefully this won't be too controversial because, Councillor Thomas, you've really given a straightforward summary now of Rushcliffe's SIL policy. And I'm pleased to see that you agree with our SIL policy. So, Madam Mayor, the Conservative group fully support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Councillor Gray, please.
Councillor Gaunt.
Councillor Gaunt.
All right, no worries.
Yeah, we as a, Madam Mayor, we as a Labour group fully concur with Councillor Thomas and the Independent group. The larger settlements within Rushcliffe have been disproportionately attacked with extremely high levels of housing through the local plan. And the only way of even beginning to mitigate this is through the allocation of SIL money. The way that East Leek in particular has been treated through this process with 1,200 new houses is verging on embarrassing, and the SIL money should be fairly and transparently allocated and done so as quickly as possible, as she suggests. The same can be said for Ruddington, with 588 new homes being built, which will quickly see its schools, transport network and other services completely overwhelmed if money is not allocated and distributed soon. With the grim spectre of the new Greater Nottingham strategic plan looming over Ruddington and other communities over the next decade, with potentially looking at thousands of new homes, completely engulfing independent villages, and turning them into suburbs, it's essential that the people of this borough feel that the processes are transparent and fair, whilst the compensation, SIL money, arrives quickly to mitigate this damage. We fully support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jones, please.
Yeah, we fully support this motion. The sad fact is that until this government changes the arrangements for the purchase of development land, so that some of the profits that currently go to landowners go to the council that designates that land, there will always be building before development of the proper infrastructure, as we know, in particular schools, health and other sports and other facilities. The motion is quite right as it stands, but I'm sad to say that I think we will still be faced with the dilemma of build first and provide things afterwards, as is happening very much with schools and health services. But we will support this motion. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Malander.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, also happy to support the motion. We all know what the issues are. We're putting measures in place to address that. Yes, happy to support.
Thank you, Councillor Malander. Councillor Edivine, please.
Yeah, Councillor Moore has already stated that we support this motion. I would just like to point out that 1,200 houses, or whatever the exact number is, in East Leek, the Borough Council actually did not support those planning applications. I believe every single one of them went to appeal, and it was the planning inspector who actually granted permission for those and not the Borough Council. And that also underlies the importance of adopting Local Plan Part 2. I don't agree with everything in Local Plan Part 2, but unless we have Local Plan Part 2, we can't protect ourselves from some of this development that was referred to. But I certainly support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Edivine. And Councillor Way, you deferred your right to speak.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm glad to see that people are supporting this, and I take on board Councillor Edivine's comments about the borough not backing the building of these big developments in East Leek. We are aware of that, and we do speak up about that when people challenge us about it being the council's fault. I think it's important that the residents of communities impacted by developments that attract community infrastructure levy should be able to see how the money is allocated and used and be involved by consultation in the spending of this money. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Way. Councillor Thomas, do you wish to respond? Councillor Thomas?
I'd just like to say that Rushcliffe did approve 800 of those 1,300 houses, but I appreciate the support that everybody's giving to the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any councillors wishing to object to or abstain from this vote? Please indicate your desire to object or abstain by raising your electronic hand. Is your hand up from previously, Councillor Edivine? I thought it was. he's trying to move it. Thank you. As there are no raised hands indicating a desire to object or abstain, then the motion is carried. So we now move on to item 12, questions from councillors. So the first question is Councillor J. Walker, please, to Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The sadness and the uncertainty we've collectively had to face since the beginning of the pandemic has been coupled with a wonderful spirit shown by many of our borough. Towns, villages and hamlets across Rushcliffe have come together to support their most vulnerable neighbours and shown what community and society can do at a grassroots level. In my ward, Reddington, the COVID-19 mutual aid group was set up before the announcement of lockdown and saw key institutions coming together and mobilised hundreds of volunteers in a matter of days. And I know this is the case across the borough. So what can we do as Rushcliffe Borough Council to continue to nurture and inspire our residents to volunteer in their communities? And what is required of us to keep this energy and good spirit functioning into the future? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, the council has always supported and worked with and in partnership with all communities, charities, organisations and businesses. Never more so than during the time of the pandemic. Even now, the council is still working because things have not changed. Things could happen over the winter, there could be spikes, and we will still need to do all that we can. We've always worked, as I say, in partnership, but also we've had something called Rushcliffe Reach, which it gives out grants to all sorts of organisations, people who are working hard in their communities. And the one thing that councillors can do is to encourage these groups that you know in your own area to come forward and put in for some of these grants. I think councillors and officers in all areas have been working hard, and they've been working with residents. You would have seen as you would have seen in the councillors' connections, because actually that has been a source of interest in what is happening across our borough. The virus is still here, and unfortunately it will be here for a while. So I think this is a good time to take advantage of all that you have done and collected over the past few months, all the people that you know, and to encourage them and to continue and support them, as we have been doing as a council. I think it's also important that we encourage all these communities, not just perhaps in our own areas, but also in others. They are still needed now and through the winter. And I was really proud of all the residents and how they responded to the need of others. I have to say that some groups have come forward, like the Ramblers, the Music Cafe, which is part of, I visited a gentleman in the Madam Mayor's ward who does that, who helps people that are lonely. So I believe we should keep doing what we are doing, what we have done as well through the pandemic, and keep doing it through the winter and it all in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Councillor Walker, do you have a supplementary question?
Yeah, I was wondering if there was a way we could organise them as a borough, but I think from what I can gather from what Councillor Mason's saying, we're just going to kind of look to encourage, but I suppose I was looking for something more kind of practical, but thank you. Thank you.
Was that a question? Was that a supplementary?
No, I didn't want to put you on the spot. Is there a practical way we could use these volunteers? That's the question, I suppose. I was looking to not put you on the spot too much because it's quite, but.
No, you're not putting me on the spot at all. What I think is important, that it's all done locally so that people are aware of what is happening and that they feel part of that community. There's been a lot of people that have approached me that have never felt part of the community, but since this, they have, and they've been helped. And I think that is our job as councillors to do that.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Councillor Gowland, do you wish to put a question to Councillor Inglis, please?
Sorry, my mute button got hidden. What homeless prevention measures did Rushcliffe Borough Council have to use during the lockdown?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you for that. I'll first state that addressing homeless in the borough is an ongoing commitment, and I refer to the 2017-2021 South Nottingham Homeless 5-year strategy that also be due for renewal next year. Yeah, and their aim is no one should have to sleep rough in Nottinghamshire. In addition to those measures already in place, the council is supporting the government's positive action on preventing landlord evictions for the COVID. The council has continued to work with those residents at risk who are becoming homelessness through the provision of advice and support, along with our partners such as Citizen Advice, who will assist on financial and related matters. As part of the Local Resilience Forum, the council has also been instrumental in encouraging the provision of 2 additional temporary domestic abuse refuges, which are providing a vital safe haven for those fleeing difficult situations in the home, obviously highlighted with the COVID lockdown. So furthermore, the council also responds to the government's Everybody In initiative, which aims for everybody deserves a safe and stable place to live in, and they've offered accommodation to the rough sleepers that have been identified in the borough.
Thank you, Councillor Inglis. Do you have a supplementary question, please, Councillor Gowland?
Yeah, thank you very much. That's all extremely encouraging, and I'm really pleased to hear that's all that happened. I wonder, with the ending of the Everybody In policy, has anything had to change? Has anybody, any of these services had to be withdrawn?
No, it will continue. This commitment's been made to the end of September, which hopefully there'll be a review at the end of that, depending on where we are with the lockdown. It's also give the small number that remain the best opportunity to successfully identify them for the move on accommodation opportunities within the council support.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you. So we now have another question from Councillor Jones, please, to Councillor Upton. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. To my friend, Councillor Upton, is it right that the government's permitted, or is it correct that the government's permitted development rights regulations enable offices to be converted into flats with 2 stories added to the height and with no minimum living spaces without planning permission?
Thank you, Councillor Upton.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. As you say, we seem to be exchanging quite a few questions and answers this evening. Without getting too technical on this one, permitted development rights for the conversion of offices to residential were brought in several years ago. Now, the new permitted development rights have just been approved by the government, and they come into effect on the 1st of August, not far away. And these will permit the addition of 2 stories to an existing purpose-built block of flats where the resultant height doesn't exceed 30 metres. But the regulations, these new regulations, do not impose minimum living spaces. That's as I read the new act that comes in on the 1st of August in reply to your question. Thank you.
Councillor Upton. Councillor Jones, do you have a supplementary question, please?
Yeah, thank you for confirming what I thought was the case. Is the Cabinet happy that the Council's planning powers about habitable space and height of buildings has been passed to developers? And will you consider making representations to the government to change this, given the extremely cramped circumstances that can arise and have arisen in some boroughs?
A couple of points there, if I may. In my opinion, we don't have many purpose-built blocks of apartments or flats that are suitable for another 2 stories and keep below the 30 metres. So that part of your question, I really struggle to see that that would be an issue in Rushcliffe. But the new regs do require provision of adequate natural light to all the habitable routes. Now, I don't think myself or the Cabinet, I can't speak for the Cabinet, but my own opinion is the law is the law, and it's coming in on the 1st of August. It hasn't actually been in operation yet, and so I wouldn't want to petition or lobby Parliament on an act that hasn't yet come into being, although it has been approved and got royal assent, I understand, to come in on the 1st of August. So in a roundabout sort of way, I think I'm saying to you no. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Upton. And the final question is from Councillor Thomas, please, to Councillor Upton again.
I think I'm batting out to this one.
Sorry,
Councillor Moore, is it?
Enough is enough.
Anyway, the question is, how and when will the council be developing its SIL infrastructure funding statement?
Councillor Moore?
That's your first question. The council is required to publish an infrastructure funding statement annually, no later than the 31st of December each year. No SIL was received in the period 2019-2020, and only a small amount was set out in demand notices issued that year. Officers are already starting to pull together the information required for the IFS.
Thank you, Councillor.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, do you have a supplementary question, Councillor Thomas?
How will you ensure members and the public are involved in the process of drawing up the infrastructure funding statement, which, as I understand it, includes a list of items to be funded by SIL?
There is no requirement to consult the public on the strategic or the neighbourhood portion passed to towns and parish councils, although parish councils and town councils may want to consider their own procedures for engaging with communities. This is localism again, as we talked about. Officers are, however, in the process of preparing some guidance for town and parish councils, which will cover the process by which they will receive SIL funds, what those funds can be spent on, and they may also, and their reporting responsibilities. Now, where there is no town parish council, and I know you're aware of this, for example, in West Bridgford or other areas with just a parish meeting, this is where the funds are to be spent by the borough council in consultation with the local community. The procedures for this community engagement in the West Bridgford area are being developed in consultation with the West Bridgford Special Expenses Group. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Well, that concludes the business for this evening, and thank you very much for attending. Have a safe journey home from your laptops.